Every behavior we do as humans is designed to reduce uncertainty. We do everything we can to increase certainty in our lives. For example, when you go down below in a boat and your eyes are registering where you are, your eyes are saying, "We're standing still," but your inner ears are saying, "No, we're moving." Your brain can't deal with that conflict, so it gets sick. The stress resulting from uncertainty is tremendous in our society. It increases brain cell death. It decreases plasticity. It makes you a more extreme version of yourself. We do almost everything to avoid uncertainty, and yet the irony is that it's the only place we can go if we're ever going to see things differently. It starts with a question. It starts with not knowing. It begins with a why and a what if. These assumptions are essential for our survival. You assume that your legs aren't going to give way when you stand on a solid surface, for example, or when you see a hole in the ground. You recognize it's a hole and you avoid falling into it. These assumptions keep us alive, but they can also get in the way, because what was once useful may no longer be useful at some point. Your brain has evolved to evolve. It has adapted to adapt. You're grounded in your history of assumptions. It's both our constraint and savior at the same time, because our brain evolved to take what is meaningless and make it meaningful. If you're not sure a predator is about to attack you, it's too late. Your brain evolved to take this meaningless data and make meaning from it. And then we hold on to these as assumptions, which creates cognitive bias. They create attractor states in the brain, and they become very stable. So how could we see differently? It's by engaging the process of creating perception. The first step is to not just admit, but embody the fact that everything you do right now is grounded in your assumptions, not sometimes, but all the time. And if you don't accept that, then you'll never create the possibility of seeing differently. If you walk away with anything from this video, I hope it's knowing the process of perception. And in some sense, if you know less than what you think you know, then you have learned something. Nothing interesting begins with knowing. It begins with not knowing. The second step is to identify your assumptions, because most of everything that we do, we don't know why we do it. The final step is to question those assumptions. But questioning assumptions is incredibly difficult, and it can be the most difficult thing you ever do. To question assumptions is to doubt what you assume to be already true, especially if that assumption defines who you are. It's to do the one thing that our brain evolved to avoid, which is uncertainty. In fact, uncertainty is such a difficult, dangerous thing to do that evolution has created a human brain that tries to avoid it altogether, to the extent that we have things like confirmation bias or cognitive bias. We start looking for evidence to confirm what we assume to be true already. We would rather hold on to assumptions that we know don't work because we somehow think that it's safer than questioning them and stepping into a place that we don't actually know, even though that other place might be a great deal better than where we are now. This actually exists all the time within politics and religion. It exists within the concept of U-turns, where we ridicule politicians for changing their mind because they got new evidence. We want them to hold on to the same path despite the evidence, which actually shifts them much more towards a belief as opposed to anything that's evidence-driven. Religious people hold on to the same path as well, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary of their beliefs. Something that may have been written 2,000 years ago in a book is often regarded as highly sacred and must be treated as doctrine with steadfast dogmatic reference. Ancient religious teachings are not discarded, even though scientific discoveries in the last 200 years alone go against almost all religious beliefs. This also leads to the idea of whether or not the brain ever does big jumps, Or does it only do small steps? The answer is the brain only does small steps. You can only get from one side of the room to the other side of the room by passing through the space in between. That's also what your brain does with ideas. You can't teleport yourself to the other side of a room. In a similar manner, your brain can only make small steps in its ideas. So whenever you're in a moment, it can only shift itself to the next most likely possible scenario. And the next most likely scenario is determined by assumptions. We call it the space of possibility. You can't do just anything. Some things are just impossible for you in terms of your perception, or in terms of your conception of the world. What's possible is based on your history. So where does that leave us with creativity? We have this concept that we are linking two things that are very far apart. But if your brain never does big jumps, what's really happening? For the person being creative, all they're doing is making a small step to the next most likely possibility based on their assumptions. It only seems like a big jump to someone else because all of us only experience the world through a personalized, limited view. The reason why it seems this way is because the observer has a different space of possibility. Creativity in this sense is only creative from an external perspective, not from the creative person's internal perspective. For the person being creative, they're making a logical next step. Their space of possibility is different. They have different assumptions and different biases. In fact, they might have a more complex space of possibility because they have more complex biases and assumptions. And maybe they have a more open attitude if they experience other cultures and assimilated more complex assumptions based on those experiences. So they have more directions in which they can move within their space of possibility. We interpret this as being creative by linking things together that are far apart. But in fact, it's a logical process of making small steps and changing your space of possibility by identifying and then questioning your assumptions. How we use those assumptions is a different matter altogether. In history, we've seen cognitive bias atrocities. We have seen them used in a way to enable and enforce bigotry, prejudice, segregation, civil unrest, hatred, and lies. Cognitive bias has poisoned the well and muddied the waters many times in the human timeline. When we are finally able to see that we have the power to use cognitive bias for the good of humanity, that's when we achieve true maturity and use creativity to improve the lives of everyone around us. Then our space of possibility can become limitless. Take care of yourself and take care of each other.